Hello there, this is MTG Degree, my name is Luke, and today we are talking about the fact that the channel name changed. Now I want to give just a tiny bit of history which shows why I didn't think that it was such a big deal. However, obviously my viewers disagree. I've gotten hundreds of comments on YouTube asking why the name changed, sent to my private messages, asked on Twitter, gotten emails. Basically, it's a bigger deal than I thought. But here's why I thought it wouldn't be a big deal. When I first made this channel, I had this intro right here. And, it didn't look that good. So then I updated it, made the logo that everyone knows now, and I had this intro. Still unanimated, but it was a new intro. We had a new logo. I changed the layout of my YouTube page, and I changed the header. So basically the whole page transformed when this new intro started way back when. And when that change happened, I did not get a single comment about the change. Then after that, I was like, I've gotten a little bit better at video editing, so I'm gonna make one that's animated, add a little bit of visual interest to the beginning of the videos. And it looked like this. It's the one that you all remember. And that also got no comment. So my view with the channel and branding and making better animations, better thumbnails, is that it's sort of like a silent appreciation. I assume that people see it happening and they're just like, yeah, this is better, but, I'm just gonna, consume this better content and just, quietly enjoy it without really saying anything. So I thought that when I changed the name and changed the intro, that it would just be like, oh yeah, this is just a small change, and I didn't expect anyone to even really care that much. So before going into specifics, I'm just gonna answer the two questions that are the most asked or the most important, and if you're just fine with that answer afterwards, then you can leave. If you want some specifics, then stick around and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So the two questions that I'd like to answer first are, is this meaning that we're gonna do not magic anymore? Are we changing to different content? And the answer to that question is no. This is still gonna be a magic channel. We're gonna do magic videos. It's still magic. And then the other question that I got asked, which I didn't get asked as much, but I thought was important, was people were wondering whether or not this was in response to a lawsuit or something, where they're like, oh, don't use MTG in your name, you're not allowed to do that. Your name's too similar to ours, or Wizards saying, oh, you can't use that. That's not what happened. I decided to change the name on my own. There's no lawsuit or anything like that. Okay, so now before we get into the why, let me just throw a quick concept at you, which is that I believe very strongly that you can reach the correct conclusions from the incorrect starting place. So, for example, when you look at historically the study of astronomy, so a bunch of people were brought up and were told, the sun rotates around the earth and everything. And that was their base that they did all their studies on, and they looked at the stars and they followed their movement and everything. And then eventually they were like, yeah, we have this great passion for this thing, and this is the way that we understood it, but there's something seems to be wrong here, so we actually think that the earth revolves around the sun, not the other way around. So they started with the incorrect, and then they did work, and then they arrived at the correct answer. So let's start with my incorrect starting position on this name change. So the reason that I originally wanted to change the name was because I was like, oh man, Wizards seems to be taking steps in the wrong direction. Especially with the Pro Tour thing. I just felt like that was really, it was just so blind, just amazingly blind to what's important, in my opinion. And so I was like, oh man, well, this doesn't bode well, so it would be good to change my name to something else. That way, if anything bad happens to Magic, then I have like more of a neutral name. So that was the original idea behind the name change, which was the incorrect idea. But I floated this idea on Twitter, which is, by the way, why following me on Twitter might be a good idea, because you guys actually get a real voice. So I said, what do you think about the name Game Degree? Change the name of the channel. And I expected like 5% of people to say yes. Like people to say like, no, we don't like change. Like people generally don't like change. But when I asked the question, actually 45% of people said that they thought it was a good idea, which was way higher than I thought. So I was like, yeah, maybe there's something here. And so then I was thinking about it some more, and I just decided that my original thought was wrong. I don't think that Magic is really going anywhere. The game just has such an amazingly pristine concept, and is just like so intricate, so interesting. It's got really the marriage of a lot of sweet aspects. It's got great art, it's got great strategy, and it fosters community, and that community which it fosters also turns out to be a pretty great community. So I think that basically Wizards could not really kill Magic. Like, they could make a lot of bad decisions and Magic would still be around because it's a great game. Basically, the only thing that Wizards can do is choose, do we want to have like an okay future, or do we want a glorious, amazing future, right? But either way, the game is still going to be fantastic. So, with that in mind, I decided changing the name for that reason was silly. But the idea of a name change and kind of what kind of things I could do with that began to blossom. So here is the main idea. So in Magic, in the content that's made, in the marketing, all that kind of thing, it's really focused on people who already know Magic, right? Has a hard time reaching out. I feel like a lot of the outreach for Magic is done by the community. It's done by somebody saying, oh, I'm gonna go play this thing, and then they say, oh, what's that? And then, you know, their friend teaches them how to play. They're like, oh, this is a really great game, because it is a really great game, and then they start playing. I feel like, you know, large community figures and stuff are not so great at pulling people from other spheres of interest, which is where this name change could be powerful. So what I want to do is, obviously, I don't just play Magic my whole life. So let's give an example. Overwatch is coming out soon. It seems like a really amazing game. And I played the beta, and while I was playing the beta for Overwatch, I was like, man, there are a lot of really interesting design decisions outside of the fact that it's a first-person shooter, nothing to do with that, but just really low-level design decisions about how they were going to implement the game and all of that sort of thing that were very interesting. And so I felt like, oh man, I could make a video talking about all of these design decisions in Overwatch, how they relate to and contrast with the design decisions in Magic, how those two games kind of relate, and how Magic could become better, or how certain ideas from Magic could be great for Overwatch, and it would just be like a very interesting presentation on the two games and game design, because I know that Magic players love thinking about deeper topics. You know, they want to not just look at the surface of the cards, but how the cards work together to do such a thing, or even why certain cards even exist in the first place. You know, like what extra level does that make? So what extra levels within Overwatch might be interesting, even though it's in a first-person shooter. So by making a video like this, people who like Magic get to see that sort of lens put on another game and see some really interesting Magic content from like a completely different, you know, fourth dimension perspective, right? And then people who like Overwatch, if the video is well made, if it gets a decent amount of views, people who like Overwatch have a good chance of seeing it on YouTube. then people who see it are like, oh man, it has some really interesting like correlations with this game, and I like games, and so those people might become interested in Magic as well. So yeah, the name change isn't to start making non-Magic content. It's to basically start making Magic content that is reaching out in another dimension, which is really something that this channel has always sort of done. Not necessarily between fandoms or anything like that, but the channel has always been a bit of a variety show. We don't just open packs on this channel, or we don't just do gameplay, or just do deck techs. It's not one of these like very one-dimensional channels that just does one thing. And that's what I think is so interesting about my channel. I kind of like that there's a lot of variety and a lot of interest for everyone. And I just feel like this would just be like one more type of interest like that. And if you want to know kind of how often these videos will be that are, you know, talking about multiple aspects of different games, talking about game design, I think, you know, like once a month or once every 2 months. It's not going to be a huge thing, but I feel like with a more flexible name like GG Degree, it's a very common term. All gamers know what GG means, good game. And I think that that is a very interesting and new facet that we can add to the channel. I hope that that was an extremely thorough explanation as to the name change, why I think that it's better all around, and I hope they look forward to seeing all the Magic content coming down the tubes. As always, I'll see you next video.